Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're tackling a major issue in Marvel Rivals, the struggle for melee tanks to survive against ranged heavy comps. Right now it's no secret that Magneto and Strange are the only tanks capable of holding their own without relying heavily on their team. But what if we change that? In this video we'll break down a series of buffs and adjustments designed to make every tank solo viable by giving them the tools they need to deal with any enemies. With new passives and ability tweaks, this will ensure tanks stay in the fight to hold the line and create opportunities for their teammates. So let's jump right in. Starting with the strongest Avenger, or at least he should be, is Hulk. Now Hulk struggles with constant poke to ranged heroes, and to counter this we're giving him a brand new passive. This way Hulk can sustain longer, build his ultimate faster, and finally bring the pain to those pesky ranged enemies. So this new passive is going to be called Rage Regeneration, and what this will essentially do is that every successful melee attack restores 3% of Hulk's maximum HP. His Gamma Shield is now getting a rework where it's now duration based instead of HP value based, and it lasts for 2 seconds. This way it's somewhat similar to Magneto's Metallic Curtain in the way that it can absorb any amount of damage for as long as the shield lasts before it expires. And to add to his passive is that every time Hulk and his allies take damage, it charges his ult by 0.15% per hit. This can incentivize the Hulk to stay aggressive and bully any frontliners that want to trade blows, and it also increases his survivability and team presence, true to his character that likes to defend his allies and take on the tougher opponents that his allies could not. Next up is Captain America. He already has a strong defensive tool with this shield, but what if we leaned further into that strength that allows him to give him more uptime in fights and make him a nightmare for anybody relying on constant damage. So with this new passive is that whenever Captain America blocks projectiles with his shield, he gains stacks. Each stack increases the next ability damage by 2% for 4 seconds, up to a maximum of 10 stacks. Now he could either stack all these percentages up, and when he has 10 stacks, he gains Unbreakable Guard for 3 seconds, which blocks all damage in front of him, including melee attacks. This way it doesn't lose any shield value for those 3 seconds. Also now the shield can directly reflect projectiles back at the enemy for 30% of its damage value instead of just random for 50% as it is now. His next rework would be that his Assemble ultimate is now a global effect, meaning you gain 100 shield per second while allies gain 50 shield per second. Because most of the time Captain Americas are just diving the backline and they're not really relying on their teammates to come and stack with them so they could get the shared HP values when he's leaving a trail. That way this can encourage Captain America to stay in the front line and absorb ranged fire and turning defense into a tactical advantage. The Unbreakable Guard moment can create impactful opportunities to push a lead. Next on the list is Groot. Now Groot's durability is already impressive with his walls, but he needs more tools to handle long-ranged harassment. So with this new passive is that every 10% of HP that is lost, Groot will drop a Spore Seed up to a maximum of 3 of them. Now each of these seeds can restore 2% of his max HP for over 3 seconds when he walks over them. Each seed picked up refreshes the healing duration, meaning they cannot stack. Seeds can also be destroyed after damaged for a certain amount of time. This incentivizes Groot to stay in the front line to be more sturdy and a bulwark tank without having Groot needing to use his walls to self-sustain. They're more meant for obstruction than it is team utility. After all, this allows just Groot to be more of a roaming tank instead of just relying on his walls for protection. And it also makes Groot a stronger front line due to the lack of his mobility. Next up is Penny Parker. Now Penny's agility and mobility are excellent, but she lacks a reliable way to mitigate damage, so we're introducing a new mechanic for her Spider Nest. The new function is that when it's deployed, the Spider Nest now emits a defense matrix in a 10-meter radius. This means that the Spider Nest will now intercept and destroy incoming projectiles within its zone, providing a safe area for allies and herself. The nest has 400 HP and can only be damaged by melee attacks or superior projectiles. This new defense matrix has a 6-second duration and a 12-second cooldown. Why this could work is that it enforces Penny's role as a frontline tank with utility while also giving her team some temporary protection from high burst damage. Even though on paper this may seem OP, but you could just think of this as like a mini Diva defense matrix. As we all know from Diva is that she can emit a similar effect that blocks projectiles in front of her, but the difference being is that this Spider Nest works more as like a SAM turret, Now to balance this is that the nest itself is still always fragile if enemies get close, meaning that strong melee divers can still counter it by rushing in. It can also still be destroyed by large projectile based abilities or ultimates or any explosive AoE effects. For example, like Thor's hammer toss or Cap's shield or Iron Man's ult can still destroy any of these spider nests. Next tank is the Thing. Now the Thing is a juggernaut in melee combat, but he often struggles when bombarded from range, and here's how we're gonna give him some little extra toughness, is that he has a new passive where every time the Thing is hit, he gains a 0.5 damage reduction, stacking up to 20%. This effect lasts 5 seconds after the last hit. Now he does not immediately gain the damage reduction effect, but instead it stacks for his embattled leap, so that way it gets a more powerful effect upon activation. And in addition is that he can activate embattled leap on himself instead of relying on allies to jump towards them, giving up any useful positions the Thing might have during combat. That way when he uses it, the damage reduction effect is buffed from 30% up to a maximum of 40%. This can encourage the Thing to keep up the pressure and keep soaking up damage, making space for his team. Next up is Thor. Now even a god like Thor can still struggle with ranged pokes, and to address that we're going to add a powerful defensive rework to his Thor Force passive. So now Thor Force charges will restore after every hit and not just one, and they could fully recharge after getting any assists or kills. Next we're removing Lightning Realm entirely, where now Thor gains a new ability where he could charge and spin his hammer in front of him to destroy any incoming projectiles, and any nearby enemies will be knocked back slightly, much like Orissa's javelin spin. Next, his hammer charge will now apply slow after impact, and they could also push multiple enemies together if they're in the path of the collision. Also, his ultimate can now be reactivated to immediately slam down, but for diminished results. But if you decide to fully charge the ult through its full duration, it deals even more damage than before. And lastly, for quality of life, is that he now does not share any cooldowns between abilities, allowing for better flow. All in this together makes Thor a stronger frontline that can be menacing up close with melee, or a lethal ranged opponent who could deal high DPS with his awakened state, or even just to defend against heavy fire with his new hammer spin ability. And finally we have Venom. He's a brutal melee fighter, but without proper sustain he gets shredded by long ranged opponents. Here's how we can fix that. Is that his third melee attack restores 5% of his HP, considering Venom has a 3-hit melee combo, finishing off with a bite at the end. Next is that his ult heals based on damage dealt, instead of just providing a shield. And if Venom were at max HP when this happens, he can now gain an overshield, much like Mantis or Penny when they're at full HP. Next, his tendril grabs deal damage over time and imply a damage reduction, meaning Venom no longer has to wait until a final effect of tendril grab to deal massive damage. And it also punishes any enemies that decide to stay within range of the tentacles. These changes can make Venom a more self-sufficient tank that won't rely heavily on diving the backline, and can encourage Venom to attack tankier enemies to gain better effects from these changes. With these buffs and adjustments, every tank now has a reliable way to survive and push through against their enemies. Whether it's absorbing damage, reflecting attacks, or healing off the damage they take, these changes could create such a much healthier balance for the tank role. But what do you think? Are these buffs fair, or do you have any ideas of your own to make tanks more viable? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more Marvel Rivals content.